Do you ever see other people's Pokemon Go shiny collections and wonder how have they got so many more shinies than me? Well, in this video, I'm going to go through 7 ways that you can get more shiny Pokemon in Pokemon Go. Stick around for the last one because I often use this method to get shiny Pokemon without even actively playing the game. So my first tip is to play shiny boosted events. In Pokemon Go, the base shiny rates for the majority of Pokemon are 1 in 512, meaning that on average it'll take somewhere in that region of encounters to get a shiny. There are also a group of Pokemon that have perma boosted shiny rates of 1 in 64, and there are some Pokemon with even higher shiny rates, but I'll get into that later on in the video. But either way, which event should you play to get more shinies in Pokemon Go? Firstly, community days. At least one of these occurs each month, and some months they have 2 because there's also community day classics, which are a repeat of an old community day. These community day events last for 3 hours, and during the time the featured Pokemon will appear much more frequently in the wild, like it will be pretty much every single spawn you see, and the shiny rates will be boosted to 1 in 25. This is a very high shiny rate, especially considering the base rates being 1 in 512 in Pokemon Go and 1 in 4096 in the mainline games. And also for the 5 hours after the event, you can complete a raid featuring the community day featured Pokemon or its evolution, and that will cause the community day Pokemon to appear around the host gym for 30 minutes, and all of these spawns have 1 in 25 shiny rates as well. However, there are some events in Pokemon Go that have even higher shiny rates, one of these being hatch days. This type of event features a Pokemon that is obtainable from 2-kilometer event eggs. You can only get these eggs from Pokestops during the 3 hours of the event, and they will only hatch the featured Pokemon. The shiny rate for the featured Pokemon is 1 in 10, meaning that each hatch will have a 10% chance of getting the shiny. Likewise, research days are events where you can obtain field research from Pokestops during the event, and completing these field research tasks will reward you with the featured Pokemon. These two have a 1 in 10 shiny rate. There are also raid days, which are 3-hour events where a featured Pokemon is in raids and appearing on pretty much every gym. These are often soloable raid bosses, and they also have a 1 in 10 shiny rate. So these are 4 types of events that offer the highest shiny rates in the game, and they are well worth looking out for in the in-game news, on social media, or just keep an eye out on this channel. For community days in particular, they can help you rack up a lot of shinies, especially if you're using certain techniques. This brings me to my second tip. So quick catching allows you to skip the animation of Pokemon being caught and instead allows you to interact with more Pokemon more quickly, and more encounters mean you'll have more chances for a shiny. This is highly beneficial in places where there are a high spawn density or a high Pokestop density, because on special events like community days, Pokestops are more likely to be lured up due to lures lasting for 3 hours. This generates more spawns and more chances for shiny Pokemon. You could always just check the Pokemon and run from it because it is slightly faster than quick catching, and if you do decide to do this, it's good to note that the Pokemon you have checked already will be turned to face you, and ones that you haven't checked generally won't be facing you, so this is a good way to stop yourself from double checking the same Pokemon. However, I do recommend quick catching over just checking the Pokemon because you don't save that much time, and you'll get XP candy and Stardust for catching them. But how do you quick catch? Well, all you have to do is encounter the Pokemon, then press and hold the berry button or the ball button depending on which hand you use, throw the ball and drag your thumb that is holding the berry button across the screen to the opposite side to pull open the berry menu. Then you can release it, tap the screen, and in the top left corner the run option will appear. Tap that and then you are out of the encounter, and you can check your inventory to see if the Pokemon has been caught, or you can just tap the Pokemon again on the map screen if you want to check it. If it instantly runs away, it's been caught, but if you encounter it again, then it hasn't been caught. A way to improve this and make this even faster is if you go into your settings and uncheck the Niantic AR setting. Then you need to go to a wild encounter and turn the AR mode on in the top right corner. This means when you first tap on a Pokemon, the Pokeball and the catch UI appears much quicker, meaning you can quick catch or check the Pokemon even faster. Overall, the quick catch technique with or without AR mode is great for shiny hunting because you can check a lot more Pokemon and catch them at the same time while skipping the catching animation. This leads me to another tip that allows you to specifically shiny hunt a Pokemon outside of events. So nests in Pokemon Go are areas where a specific Pokemon will appear more frequently. These locations are normally in public parks, nature reserves, generally any grassy area with public footpaths that are places of leisure. And the Pokemon in these nests migrate every 2 weeks on Thursday between midnight and midnight UTC. So it's worth checking your local nests every couple of weeks. And even if you don't think there are any nests around you, it's worth checking every now and again in areas where you think there could be one, because new nests can be added during migration and when new seasons take place. It's also worth noting that not every Pokemon is a nesting species and only certain ones can nest each season, so there is a seasonal rotation of nesting Pokemon. These are all the Pokemon that have been reported to nest at some point during the game's lifespan, and these are all the Pokemon that can currently nest for this season, and we can see that some of the Pokemon are already known to nest, and some Pokemon have become nesting species this season. And with the fact that nests spawn the same Pokemon over and over again, this makes it a good way to target a specific Pokemon and shiny hunt it. There are no additional shiny boosts for nest Pokemon outside of their base shiny rates, but because there are so many of the same Pokemon, it's a good way to shiny hunt. It's a bit like shiny hunting during Spotlight Hour, where there is just one Pokemon spawning with no shiny boosts, but because of the amount of spawns of that same Pokemon, you do have a decent chance of getting the shiny. Plus with nests, the spawns will be there for longer than just an hour. Also, if the Pokemon in the nests happen to be perma boosted at 1 in 64 shiny rate, like Onix, Lickitung, Skarmory and Bronzor to name a few, getting a shiny can be fairly easy. Also, there are some meta-relevant Pokemon like Swinub, Machop, Chinchou, etc. that can nest, and you can use those nests to grind candy and Candy XL for them. Also, some Stardust boosted Pokemon like Meowth, Shroomish, Shelder, etc. can nest, meaning that if you do find one of these nests, you can grind a lot of Stardust. It's a good idea to check local Discords and Facebook groups to see any local nest reports. You are more likely to find nests in larger parks where there are more spawn points, and they are a lot easier to identify because the nesting Pokemon will appear in large clusters. Nests are a great way to shiny hunt a specific Pokemon outside of shiny boosted events, and another way you can do this is by doing field research tasks. So as I mentioned earlier, some Pokemon are perma boosted, meaning they have 1 in 64 shiny rate, and some field research tasks when completed reward you with encounters with perma boosted Pokemon. So it might be worthwhile learning which Pokemon are perma boosted. These are generally Pokemon that are considered rarer, Pokemon like Lickitung, Lapras, Spinder, Onix, Clamperl, etc. Niantic aren't really that open about the shiny rates for a lot of Pokemon, but you can look for online resources that will give you an idea for which Pokemon are perma boosted. There are some websites, for example, that can track shiny rates based on community reports. Once you know roughly which Pokemon are perma boosted, you can then use websites like Pokemon Go Hub or LeakDuck, which compile the current field research for the month, season or event, so you can target specific field research tasks that get you encounters with boosted shiny rate Pokemon. This is a good way to increase your chances for shiny Pokemon, but what if you wanted to shiny hunt legendary or mythical Pokemon in Pokemon Go? So I mentioned earlier, some Pokemon have higher base shiny rates than others, and in particular the highest shiny rates are for legendary and mythical Pokemon. The shiny rates are around 1 in 20, and most legendary and some mythical Pokemon appear in 5-star raids. So I highly recommend using your daily free raid passes on legendary raids for the shiny rates. But also because these Pokemon are some of the best Pokemon in the game, especially for the Master League. You do also have around a 4% chance of getting a legendary Pokemon encounter from Go Battle League win rewards if you're ranked 20 or higher. These encounters have the same 1 in 20 shiny rates. And during the Go Tour events in the past, we have had legendary Pokemon appearing in the wild, which are shiny eligible as well. It's also worth noting that some mythical Pokemon are released in special research, and often there are special researches that offer a guaranteed shiny version of a mythical Pokemon, like there has been for Shiny Mew, Celebi, Jirachi and Shaymin. Some of these Pokemon are behind paywalls though, and I imagine this will be the norm with more mythical shinies in the future. Legendary Pokemon, however, usually have their shinies released in 5-star raids. And with that said, there is also a way that some legendary Pokemon can help you get shiny Pokemon. So certain battle moves have adventure effects, which are effects that can be used outside of battle, and Origin Palkia's Spatial Rend can expand the wild Pokemon encounter radius, so you reach and interact with Pokemon that you wouldn't be able to normally. This means you can shiny check more, and therefore it means you have more chance of picking up a shiny. This adventure effect does however cost 5 Palkia candy and 5,000 Stardust for 10 minutes, so it is quite pricey. But if you do have the resources, it might be worth using this effect during events like Community Day, maybe Spotlight Hours or something like that. Also, Origin Dialga's Roar of Time allows you to pause the timers of incense, lucky eggs and star pieces. This costs 5 Dialga candy and 5,000 Stardust, but increasing the time you can use an incense can also lead to more encounters and therefore more chances for shinies. For my last tip, this is the one that helps out a lot, especially when you can't use your phone, and of course I'm talking about auto catchers. So I've actually managed to get quite a few shinies by using the Pokemon Go Plus. A lot of times when I can't actively play the game on my phone, like when I'm working or driving, I connect the Pokemon Go Plus, and pretty often when I check my inventory later, I have a new shiny Pokemon. Generally, the more Pokemon you check, the more shiny Pokemon you're likely to encounter. So if you can be checking Pokemon whilst you can't even play the game, this definitely helps your chances. So I would highly recommend getting a Pokemon Go Plus or some kind of auto catcher that you can have running in the background whilst you're doing other things. It's even worth having having the auto catcher with you when you're actively playing the game as well, because you can put it on in the background whilst you're playing Go Battle League or whilst you're raiding. Just remember, you do need a lot of Pokeballs for the auto catcher to keep catching Pokemon, but if you are near a Pokestop, it shouldn't be too much of a problem because they can also automatically spin Pokestops. And if you aren't near Pokestops, you could open the max amount of gifts that you can each day to keep on top of your Pokeball supply. A warning though is to not check your journal too often after you've had your auto catcher connected, because you might see some shiny Pokemon that the auto catcher has failed to catch. This is because the auto catcher will only throw one ball, so you only have one chance to catch it, and it only takes into account the ball and the catch medal multipliers, so you often can lose shinies this way. But the way I see it is that any shiny Pokemon or any Pokemon in general that you get from an auto catcher is a Pokemon you wouldn't have had because you couldn't play the game at that time. So with that said, how can you increase your chances of catching a Pokemon, and in particular catching legendary Pokemon from raids? If you want some tips to increase your catch rate, then check out this video next.